take your seat. That's great. Let's get started. So thank you very much for coming to my session today. My name is Ning Zhou, and I'm a Senior Program Manager in Microsoft Norway Development Center in the Graph and People Service team. So I work with people contacts, and that is actually used in many different Office products. Actually, I just joined Microsoft very recently, last month. So most of the talk I'm going to talk about today is actually from my previous job at Schibsted. People here probably know more about their business here in Sweden, the newspaper Aftonbladet, and also the marketplace like Blocket. My work is there was on the technical product lead of data, where we build a data platform, and we also did some very cool machine learning application on top of the platform. So today I would like to share with you a little bit hands-on experience I learned from the work there doing personalization. I'll first talk about why, and then a little bit on how. So I'm going to start with what is personalization? Instead of trying to define it with one sentence or something, I'll try to show some examples instead. It's not examples from my own experience, but some examples here that everyone might already use from different sectors. For example, this is YouTube. This is what they recommend to me. You can see that since I'm Chinese and I listen to lots of Chinese songs, they definitely capture that trend. This is a personalized list for me. And the second example is Etsy, where there are many people who are selling handmade stuff. And this is their picks for Stella, which is also me. You can see that I like Japanese style stuff, so that's why I get all those interesting stuff. If you visit Etsy, you will see something different. A third example, everyone probably all know it, this is Facebook. This is a friend recommendation they give to me. Those people you probably know. And all those people, I know them. Do you know them? I guess no, right? So this is personalized list as well. The fourth example is from fin.no. If you don't know about it, it's like a Blocket in Norway. It's also a marketplace where people can buy and sell different things. They have a recommendation feed on the front page, which is personalized. Because I'm checking some hytta, or like a mountain cabin, and also like a nice house with nice view recently. That's why I got all those recommendations. In addition to those, actually, we also can see lots of application of personalization in very more serious sectors like banking. Here's an example from a Microsoft client. They work with a bank called Tagrin, and they use personalized suggestions to their users to improve the conversion of the banking business. Just given all those 5 examples, I guess you already have a general rough idea of what personalization is. I'll try to define it in one sentence here. So in my opinion, personalization is to optimize the user experience based on both the intent, what you know about the user, but also the contextual information of the session. With the context and the intent, you can actually provide a different user experience for every single session and make that special. When I talk about intent and the context here, so by intent, I'm more talking about the user, like who they are, what they want. For example, if you have a service with login, then you probably know a little bit about your user, like their birthday, their age, gender, address. But even without that information, you probably also know something about what they bought from your services before, what have they clicked, what have they browsed, what have they added into their bookmark. All those, I call it intent in this talk. And the other dimension will be context. What is context? So here I talk about something that is specific in the current session. For example, when is the user actually visiting us right now? Is it like a working hour on a Monday, or is it midnight on a Saturday evening? And also the IP location and of the exact visit. Are they visiting from a smartphone, from an app, or are they visiting from a desktop? all those kind of information turns out to be very useful when you try to personalize their experience here. With this context in mind, with this context and intent dimensions in mind, let's talk about why we want to personalize. So I'll try to draw a matrix, high context, low context, high intent, and low intent. Like how much do you know about this exact session? There are, we can say, 4 different scenarios. There's high context, high and low, low and high, high and low. Well, anyway. So some of you might have heard about something called a BCG matrix. I'll try to borrow some of those consulting frameworks here. They often say, oh, there's a star scenario where you can actually achieve a lot. There's some a dog scenario, it's just a losing scenario. So what is the case with personalization? Is it also like that? What do you think? So just a quick guess. So do you agree that when you don't know much about the user intent and you don't know much about the session context, it's a dog scenario. Don't try to do much. So if you agree, please raise your hand. I guess some people agree. Actually, I'm with the majority here. I disagree with that. I think there's no dog scenario, actually, for personalization. Let me just explain a little bit why. You don't have to agree with me. This is purely my personal opinion, and I think different opinion is good because we're doing personalization. So if we think about the high context, high intent scenario, it's often very easy to say, oh, this is the case, this is the star case. We can do best personalization here. Let's do it. That's right. But that's also kind of dangerous. Why? Because in this case, users, they also know that you know a lot about them. So they have a very, very, very high expectation. A good example here is that you have a repeating user. Let's assume you have an e-commerce website. You have a repeating user who have bought a lot of things from you, so you know their intent, you know their history. And now they come to your website, they're searching for something like, I want a new iPhone MX and black color. And you have very clear context from this session, what they're looking for exactly. If you try to be creative and do personalization, you'd better be really spot on. Otherwise, they will say, hey, I told you I'm looking for an iPhone MX Black. What are you suggesting to? Like an Android phone, pink, and I don't know, whichever brand. It's very easy to backfire. Because of their high expectation, when you overguess, and it backfires, it can backfire really, really badly. So I would say that's the case like a cash call. You want to do personalization, but you should do it safely and make sure you get the benefit without really, overguessing and annoy them instead. The real star scenario for personalization, in my opinion, is actually when there's a low context and high intent. So the reason I think so is because this often happens when you have an old user just coming to your homepage of your app or your website where they don't have a very strong intention. So in this case, you have a lot of knowledge about the user to actually say, I guess this is what you want with a very high confidence. But they don't have a very high expectation because they're just arriving. They haven't really expressed what they want from this session yet. If you recommend for example, on your landing page of your app, saying that, hey, this is the news today, I think, and they're really interested in the news you recommended, this can be a really great serendipity experience. They will say, wow, you really got me, that's good. That's why I think this is actually the star scenario where we should try to achieve most with personalization. And for the low context, low intent, why I say it's not a dog case is actually something we can do something here maybe. It's because first, low context, and low intent, so low user expectation. Basically, you can try whatsoever. You probably won't really surprise the user much. You won't really annoy them much either. Well, how you can personalize here is that you make assumptions. You assume that most of the users I get, if this is a weekend, I think they're looking for this. And if they come to a page where I show an item, they probably want to buy it. If they come to a page where there is a news story, then they probably want to read and comment or share. So this is where you can try something more, risky and take some risk without really disappointing your user much. The last one is about the high context and low intent. Here's a little bit tricky. Well, it's because you already know pretty much about what user wants, even though you don't really know who they are. In general, I would say in this case, you can do pretty much already pretty well with non-personalized information. Try to personalize. You can try that, but it's a question mark. I'm not sure how much we can actually do in addition. Just to sum it up a little bit, so why we should do personalization, regardless which case we are in, is because there's no single best answer for all users, and we want to serve different needs to different users, and we want to save them the hassle of, expressing what they want for this session through many, many different steps. And we also can inspire them. When they're on our landing page without a clear idea what they want, we can provide something we think might be interesting to them. And also, in the end, we can make users feel special. Everyone enjoys feeling special. So if you come to me saying, "Hi, Ning," instead of "Hi, the speaker today," I probably will feel better. So then let's talk about how. So personalization is a very broad topic. I wouldn't be able to talk about how of everything, so I'll mostly focus on one use case I did hands-on in my personal experience. This is the homepage recommendation feed for fin.no. As you can see here on the right side, it's a screenshot from the mobile app front page. You can see there's different categories. You can look for things like a house, car, and the random stuff there. And then on the bottom of that, there's a recommendation feed. Like depending on who you are, we recommend different things. And on the left hand, sorry, it's the opposite way on my screen. On the left hand, it's how it looks like on an item detail page. You can look at an item, and then on the bottom of the page, we will also make a recommendation of things similar to the item. So today we focus more on this recommendation because this is here personalization actually plays a stronger role. This is a typical case of low context. They just open the app. I don't know what they want, but high intent. If they're actually a repeating user, I know some history about them. I'd like to share 3 lessons. And the first lesson we learned was that using rich signals helps a lot. So when I talk about signals, I'm talking about different types of data. I'll say it's not a one-to-one matching, but generally you use many different types of data, then you are using rich signals. There can be content signals which are not necessarily personalized, like the texture information from the title and the body of things and image. Also metadata, like when was this thing posted and stuff like that. And there are also personal signals, like the session context we mentioned, as well as the user profile, user history, what they clicked, what they bought in the past. What we tried at Fin is that when we add lots of information together into a recommendation model, here we used a matrix factorization, and we put a long list of different user behavior signals inside, including not only click view an item, but also like add it to my favorite list, contacting the seller, or like send a message, check their phone. All those different features, signals, we put them into the same metric factorization model, and the model is actually able to assign different weight according to how telling they are. And we managed to make a significant improvement on the click-through rate for the recommendation on the list I showed just now. The second lesson is about how we train the models. We use metric factorization, but we also use more complex models. That is kind of a hybrid model using both the content features, like image and the text, plus those user behavior metric factorization features. So when we combine them together, there is often two different ways of training the model. The first way is, I call it a staged training. So you can see here, we got the different data sources, like say data 1, 2, 3 to n, and then we can train one model for each. And then we combine all those features together, and we have a combined feature, then we train a hybrid model on the combined features and give the final result. So I call this staged fashion because there are two stages. Stages one is the per data stage, and then there's a hybrid stage later. A more modern way of training it is actually end-to-end. Like you have a data 1, 2, 3, n, doesn't matter, throw them all in, and we're gonna build a great model and give you the result. I didn't draw the model here, but you can imagine a big box that is the model. This is actually a newer trend. Today, I'm actually not recommending this one, but rather say, hey, I think staged fashion, the old good staged fashion is pretty good for some good reasons. So first, if you want to train end-to-end, you need to have more data. It's very high data needs. And let's face it, in Nordic, we're not super big market, super big country. We actually not necessarily have that many users. And also, I believe some of you here are actually from startups, and you start with a smaller user community, and you don't start with 1 billion users. In that case, trying to train end-to-end is not very easy. And also, this model tends to be bigger and more complex. It's not saying that you're training 4 models, then it's 4 models in a staged fashion, and you're only training 1 model here, so it's simpler. No. When you're training 1 model instead of 4, you actually need to include all those 4 into 1. So it's often larger and more complex when you're talking about per model size. It's also more difficult to interpret and debug. If something goes wrong, it's difficult in an end-to-end model, it's difficult to tell which data exactly actually went wrong. And also at the end, it's hard to reuse the model. If you say, oh, I have a new scenario where I have data 1 and 2, but not the rest, you can't really reuse this end-to-end trained model. Well, in the formal case here, you can actually reuse the model 1 and 2 for data 1 and 2 and just retrain the hybrid model later. So this is how the model looked like behind the front page recommendation on Fin. We use different information here. There's an image, text, metadata, like price, who's the seller, location, and there's also the user behaviors, as always. We train a separate model for the image, and a separate model for text, and for location, and a separate model for the behaviors. We call those models a featureizer. So what they do is that they turn the raw data into what we call a feature embedding, which is kind of like a latent space where you can actually combine different type of features from different data types together. And when we combine them together, which is the R400, this means like we make a 400-dimension vector from all the different data sources, and then we train a new hybrid model on top of this to actually make the final recommendation. By doing it in this way, we gain several benefits. The first is that we can, of course, combine different data types together, but also we can actually easily tune a single, tune for a single type of feature without really, change the part for the others. Like for text information, we can say, oh, we put title only, but later we also try title with a description. Then we don't need to change the image part when we're training the text part. And the third thing is that actually we also have, I showed that we have different recommendations, both on the detail page and also on the front page. By training things in staged fashion, we can actually reuse some of the featureizer models for both. We don't need to train twice. So that's why in lesson 2, I said end-to-end is a newer fashion. It's very simple, very clean. But in reality, the old staged fashion is actually not bad. And the third lesson I would like to share here today is that actually when we combine the different features together, we want to combine them in a smart way. So by smart, I want to give 2 examples here. The first is that we can actually use something called the attention mechanism. Do I have a page? No, I don't. Sorry. So we can use something called attention mechanism to actually choose which kind of data is contributing in every different single sessions. Are you familiar with the attention mechanism here? Anyone heard about it? I see someone heard about it. So for the ones who haven't heard about it, so attention mechanism, as its name called, is that when you get, let's say, a long feature vector, many dimensions, you don't always looking into the same place for every different case. For example, this is a difficult one. So for example, if let's take the example of marketplace ads. Some of ads, they have image and they have a title and a body text. Some of them, they don't have image. So for the ones who have images, maybe you want to pay attention to the image because that's where users pay most of the attention to. But for the ones without any image there, it doesn't make sense to pay attention to image because there's no image. So in that case, you might better move your attention to the title because that's where users see first. So it's a mechanism that can dynamically change which dimension you should look into in your feature vector. In our case, we actually try to use it to balance the feature from a personalized part and the non-personalized part. When we get a user with high intent, we know what they did before, and we know a lot about where is their interest. We actually pay attention to those features because they're the most telling features about the user. And when it's a new user, we don't know much about them. Then we leverage the attention mechanism to pay attention to the non-personalized part, since we don't have enough intent about this user. So in this way, we can try to tackle the cold start problem when we get a new user or we get a new item. Here is one example. You can see that in the weight map, there is much higher, it looks brighter in the user behavior part because this is a returner user. It was me, so. And also you can see that maybe it's difficult to see from the big screen, but the image part is actually slightly more brighter than the location and than the text part because user is actually looking the model is actually know that the user look at the images more. So when there is a good image, we actually really use that information. There's also different ways to do it. We also tried to use a multi-armed bandit model to actually select results from sub-models. So this is also a staged trained model, but kind of different from the previous one. Here, instead of using feature writer in the earlier stage, actually we use a model that actually makes their own recommendations. So for example, model 1 will use its own data and make a list of candidates for the final recommendation, and each model does the same. This drawing is a little bit problematic because the sub-models, they can also use more than one data sources. So it doesn't have to be like model 1 only uses data 1. The model 1 can also use more than one type of data sources. But the idea is that maybe they only use a subset of the total data here, and they actually generate their own candidates list in a different way. So they can try some simple rule-based model. They can try really complicated things and very risky. But then we have a bandit model who collect all the candidates from the sub-models and check their score, check their belief. This is my recommendation, this is my confidence in that it's a good recommendation. And it will actually generate the final results and present to the user. You can have different choices on how to build this bandit model. You can use a regression, you can use a deep network. This is up to you. There are different choices. But in general, we find it's quite interesting that the final results, as you can imagine, is better than any of the single model. Yet, we do see that some models, like these different models that actually perform the best in different scenarios. That's what the 3 lessons I'd like to share, and just takeaways of today is that I want to say that why we want to do personalization is because it can generate great user experience. That's what we all want. And actually, you don't need to know a lot about the user in order to actually do personalization well. So try it. Don't hesitate. And then how to do it, 3 lessons, use rich signals, try stage training, because it's easy to start, and also be smart on how to combine different feature types. There's 2 things I would like to call out. First, make sure you nail the standard scenario before you go personalization. Serena was asking me earlier, hey, why do I need to do that? It's because the standard one often only uses a feature from the content. You're just adding your understanding of the user on top. If you don't have a good understanding of the content, it's unlikely you're going to actually do a good match, regardless how well you understand the user. And then the last point, definitely last but not least, privacy. Personalization can be perceived as really, really, really creepy if you don't respect your users. So don't surprise them and try to help users to understand why this personalization happened, what you are trying to tell them. Otherwise, be careful. I put on my end user hat and say, let's do it, let's respect user privacy. So there are some references and context here. We have my colleagues. Oh, I'd like to thank my Finn colleague Simon 8. We have did all those together, and you can check our 2 papers. They're both open online, and there are some Microsoft resources talking about personalization as well. In addition, there are many great examples from the industry, different companies who also do personalization very well. You can check them out. If you have more questions about this talk, you can send me a message on LinkedIn, or if you want to ask in Microsoft how we do personalization in our Azure service, I have a colleague who is also here today. You can try to find him. His name is Shukat. If you can't find him here, email him. So thank you very much. And do we still have time for questions?